So on this video, we're going to do the same proving the identities. I'm just adding new examples to the quiz 8.2. So let's start with this one. It says 1 plus sine of x over 1 minus sine of x plus sine of x minus 1 over 1 plus sine of x equals 4 secant of x tangent of x. I like these problems because they show how diverse these trigonometric identities can be. Okay. Now the key here is to notice that sine of x minus 1 and 1 minus sine of x are not the same thing, right? Subtraction is not commutative, therefore we gotta take care of that. Now, my students already know whenever we add fractions, we always need a common denominator. Here, the common denominator is 1 minus sine of x times 1 plus sine of x. So on the left side, we have that we need to multiply by 1 plus sine of x over 1 plus sine of x. Okay, that would give us a common denominator times 1 plus sine of x over 1 minus sine of x plus, on the right side, we need to multiply by this term 1 minus sine of x. Okay, so I'm going to write 1 minus sine of x over 1 minus sine of x times sine of x minus 1 over 1 plus sine of x. Okay, now we FOIL the top, we FOIL the bottom. The bottom is the difference of squares, but I'm going to FOIL it anyway. So let's start with the top. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times sine is sine. Sine of x times 1 is sine again. And sine times sine is sine squared. Plus, here we also FOIL, but look how it FOILs. 1 times sine is sine. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Negative sine times sine is negative sine squared. And negative sine times negative 1 is plus sine of x. Okay. Over, since we have a common denominator, we can put it in the same denominator. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times negative sine is negative sine of x. Sine of x times 1 is sine of x. Plus sine of x times negative sine of x is negative sine squared of x. Okay, now adding like terms. So 1 plus 2 sine of x plus sine squared. Sine of x plus sine of x again, plus 2 sine of x, minus 1 minus sine squared. Middle terms are equal to 0, so you're left with minus sine squared of x. Notice that 2 sine of x plus 2 sine of x is 4 sine of x. Sine squared of x minus sine squared of x is 0. 1 minus 1 is also 0. So you're left with 4 sine of x over 1 minus sine squared of x. Now from here, notice that we're going to use an identity here. 1 minus sine squared of x. By now you should know that this is cosine squared of x. Now this is the trick. I'm going to split cosine squared into 2. So I'm going to have 4 sine of x over cosine of x times cosine of x. Okay, and you can do that because what is the definition of cosine squared of x is cosine of x times cosine of x. And the reason I want to do that is because now I'm going to split it into a fraction. So it's going to look something like this. Times 1 over cosine of x. Now, I'm going to use another identity. What is sine of x over cosine of x? It's tangent of x. And what's 1 over cosine of x is secant of x. And that proves the identity. Okay. Now let's go to the next example. Change color here. So again, remember not the technique, but the strategy is going from the hardest part to the simplest part. So this case again is left to right. If I only have tangents and cosecants and secants and cotangents, the first thing I want to do is change them all to sines and cosines. So tangent is sine of x over cosine of x, plus cotangent is cosine over sine, over secant is 1 over cosine, plus cosecant is 1 over sine. Okay, now from here we add these two fractions. We need a common denominator. So what is the common denominator? Well, it's the multiple of these two. I'm going to multiply on the left by sine of x over sine of x times sine of x over cosine of x, plus on the right I'm going to multiply by cosine over cosine, so cosine of x over cosine of x times cosine of x over sine of x, over same thing here because it's the same common denominator. So on the left side, sine of x over sine of x times 1 over cosine of x. On the right side, cosine of x times over cosine of x times 1 over sine of x. Okay, from there you just multiply across. So sine times sine is sine squared, plus cosine times cosine is cosine squared, over sine of x cosine of x. Okay, put it in the same denominator now that we have a common denominator, and I'm going to do the same exact thing on the bottom. Sine of x times 1 is sine of x, plus cosine of x over sine of x cosine of x. Okay, again you have a fraction over a fraction. That's the same thing as taking the fraction at the top, leaving it fixed, so sine squared of x cosine squared of x over sine of x cosine of x, and multiplying that by the reciprocal of the bottom fraction. So sine of x cosine of x over sine of x plus cosine of x. From here, you do not want to multiply them, okay? It sounds unintuitive, I know, and I've said it before. What you want to do is using the commutative law of multiplication, meaning I'm going to switch these two around. Now, I can go ahead and simplify sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x. That's equal to 1, okay? And then I'm going to switch this one, so sine of x plus cosine of x, and I'm left with sine of x cosine of x over sine of x cosine of x, okay, using the commutative property. Now that's equal to 1 as well, and you're left with 1 over sine of x plus cosine of x, which is your answer. Okay, now let's go to the next one. This one is a little more interesting, but the same basic principles apply. From here, they're already in cosines and sines. So what I'm going to do is start to use identities. Now, looking at these two, my intuition tells me that I have to factor cosine squared. So if I factor cosine squared of theta, I have 2 sine square of theta plus cosine square of theta. Now, since what I want to reach is only with sine to the fourth, I'm going to change cosine squared and cosine squared into 1 minus sine squared. So on the left side, we have 1 minus sine squared of theta, okay? And inside the brackets, you have 2 sine squared of theta plus 1 minus sine squared of theta. Okay, so I changed this term and this term. Now on the left, I still have that. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for now. we add like terms, so 2 sine squared of theta minus sine squared of theta, and I put the 1 first, is 1 plus sine squared of theta. And here we FOIL, 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times sine squared is sine squared of theta. Negative sine squared of theta times 1 is minus sine squared of theta. And negative sine squared of theta times positive sine squared of theta is negative sine to the 4 of theta. The middle term is equal to 0, and you're left with 1 minus sine to the 4 theta, which is also your answer. If you have any comments, leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, share with your classmates. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.